I grew up the daughter of two blind parents back east in Massachusetts, and a younger brother who was sick with cancer for 10 years of his life. And there was hardship. We were, financially very, very poor. My parents didn't work. We lived on welfare. But I had a lot of love in my life and a lot of arts. I was very fortunate to go to an extremely arts-rich school as a child, from K through 8. So I had theater, dance, music, and visual arts for an hour a week, every week, for 9 years. And the arts, and then I went on to study more arts in high school, and I created my own major at Harvard when I was 19 years old in theater, child psychology, and education. Because at that point, even at 19 years old, I already knew the healing power of the arts. I knew that the arts, in my mind, save lives. And I've been committed to and working in the arts for 30 years, in arts education specifically. I was a drama teacher for many years. And then in about 12, 15 years ago, I started doing more teacher professional development. I have my admin credential, but I didn't want to be a principal because I felt like everything I have to do has to be about the arts all day, every day, for all kids. I started a nonprofit. We made a documentary film that's a statewide advocacy tool to educate people about why the arts are important. I can share that resource with you. I'm going to share some resources digitally, Sudhi, later, like some of the games we played today. I'm not a big fan of handing out paper if I don't have to. So I'm going to share some games and I can share some links. So I made a film, a 12-minute documentary film called Arts is the Root. And it's designed as a statewide advocacy tool to show at a PTA meeting, a school site council meeting, a school board meeting, any place where people are making budget or curricular decisions. And it's available for free in English or Spanish. So I'd love to share that with you, to show it to your families. I'm particularly proud of the Spanish one because we had it done in LA where they did the NPR style of translation. So each actor has their own voice, and then they bring down the English speaker. So, as you can see, I live and breathe arts every day, both in the work that I do. So most of the work I do now is working with teachers, often classroom teachers who they themselves did not have much access to the arts. I don't know how many of you know this, but in California, we had passed a law in 1978 called Prop 13, which basically decimated public school funding. And we went from being first in the nation for public school funding to, at some point a few years ago, 49th in the nation. I looked recently, we're kind of starting to crawl back up again. But the arts were obviously the first thing to go. So now we have a generation of classroom teachers who grew up not having the arts themselves. If they grew up here in California, most likely they had very limited access to arts. And yet there's also research that shows that students, especially students, low socioeconomic, students of color, they have less access to the arts, and yet they're the ones who, if arts are infused into their schools, it's shown to reduce dropout rates, keep kids engaged, bring up test scores, all sorts of things. There's lots and lots of research, and we talk about that in the film as well. And so for me, it's an equity issue. It's a social justice issue. And I'm dedicating the rest of my professional career to working for and to ensure that more kids get more access to arts. Personally, the arts are also very, very healing and transformative for me. As I mentioned earlier, my brother had cancer for 10 years, and he died when he was 18. And it's interesting because I've been making books I made them in my 20s, and then I stopped, and I've been now making them for about 6 or 7 years. But I sort of remember, oh, wait, I was a collage artist when I was a teenager. I had like huge sort of stuff collaged all over my walls. And then when my brother passed away, I actually took pieces of a foam core, and I made an 8-foot tall mural to pay homage to him and his life. I wish I still had that. I think it ended up in my parents' basement. But I was like, oh, so I was using art back then as a 21-year-old to sort of process feelings and emotions. Now what I do, Mars, can you hand me this is my daughter, Marcella, by the way. Sweetheart, can you hand me the one that says books? The big one. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Yeah, just as a side note, I have 3 kids. Marcella is my youngest. My son just graduated from high school yesterday. I'm feeling particularly excited about that. He graduated from the School of the Arts in San Francisco. from Soda, and in theater tech, and he's off to Rochester Institute of Technology in the fall to study photography. And I have a 13-year-old who's also super passionate about the arts. She and my mom went last night and saw Hamilton. So Marcella and I were very jealous, but instead we went and spent the night last night at Pigeon Point at the youth hostel there, at the lighthouse. So we had our own little special Half Moon Bay field trip. So back to my story though. So I've been making books now for six or 7 years. I studied with a woman named Lisa Sonora Beam, who wrote a book called The Creative Entrepreneur. And this is an actual made book. A lot of the times I actually construct the entire book from scratch, but there's a gentleman who gets old books, like old library books, and he guts them and puts binders and then puts white pages on them. So I spend typically 6 or 7 hours making a book. And we're not going to have 6 or 7 hours today, unfortunately. It would be nice if we could be here all day and make books. But then it's a place where I write. And it's where I do both my personal writing and my professional writing. So I'm actually going out camping this weekend, and I'm going to bring my bookmaking materials there. So that's one of the main things we're going to be doing today, is actually making books. And I offer that resource to you as a strategy to use with your families. I do something else called Family Arts Nights. And I'll put on my business cards later, and please grab them. I can come to your schools or communities, or it could be a Saturday morning, it could be a morning coffee time. But I do activities, both drama and bookmaking, with parents and kids together. And it's a really great way to sort of do intergenerational art making and celebrating together. So we're gonna be making books today. And as I was saying, books are just, to me, I had a friend whose son went to a school, I use this analogy, he went to a school in the East Bay where the 6th grade boys build their own desks before they sit at them. And I think it's really powerful if you make your own book before you write in it, then it just has this sacredness to it, and that you want to go back. And it's easy to also visually remember, I was in that meeting, it was that page where I had like this circle. I can go back and like visually reference instead of skimming through all pages that look the same. So it gives students and families and people just ownership and an emotional tie to where they're going to do their writing. So now I have an entire red bookshelf at my house that's filled with the top shelf with books I've made, and then all the bookmaking supplies that I need right next to my kitchen table. And my little one is over there working on her book, so we've been making books for years together. It's sort of a language we speak in our family, is bookmaking. And as I said earlier, I'm also a drama teacher. So that's the other thing. I'm going to do a few theater warm-ups with you as well today, sort of team building. And one of my premises for all the theater work I do is that it's really important to create a container. Same thing in the book as a container. They're both a container, a sort of safe space to go. So the theater exercises I teach are about building community, or I start with building community before I start with lead into other skills like voice or body or improv or play production. But first you have to build community, and you have to build a sense of safety and a sense of a place where I feel like I can take a risk. I feel like I can be creative here and no one's gonna laugh at me. So someone said yesterday at my son's graduation, I think it was the valedictorian, said, if many of us, or might have been the principal, many of these students, if they had gone to another high school, they might have been bullied. But here they are in a place where they get to be sort of fly their freak flags, he said, and sort of be themselves. And I think that's an unfortunate piece also. And I worked for a middle school in Hillsborough, actually, and my principal said to me, "Oh, Michelle, it's all those kids that we wouldn't know where else we would put them. They all end up in your drama classroom." And it's interesting that theater and the music and dance and visual arts, it's often sort of kids who feel like maybe they don't fit in some way or another in some sort of traditional mold, and they end up sort of finding refuge. That's another word I would use, is refuge. I'd use words like sacred, community, refuge. And I think the arts always provide that it's a language. If you talk to your families that you work with about the arts of their communities and their cultures, very, very rich. Visual arts, music, dance, song, so much. So that's another thing, that when Mauricio and Milton talked about sort of asking people to tell their stories, I would ask them to share their arts. What are the arts that your family participates in or celebrates? So I would say it's much more commonplace and celebrated sometimes. Okay, so I want to give everyone plenty of time to be actually doing. So two things. One, in a little while, we're going to be making books. So you're not going to want to have things in front of you like croissants or computers or notebooks or whatever. So I just threw this together this morning. This is kind of, I hesitate to show my samples because I really want people to make their own. But you know, this got some scrimped paint. It's got stamps. It's got collaged things into it. It's held together with a rubber band. So I brought a ton of materials over there for you to dive into. There's scissors, the fun cut-edge scissors, stickers, rubber stamps, alphabet stamps. Please try and keep them in alphabetical order. Varying ink pads of different sizes, hole punches, washi tape. Lots of fun paper for collaging and cutting and folding, as well as lots of plain paper to make sort of, and I would say make your book like at least 10 pages or more. And then it's a place you could consider this like your summer journal, or, and again, or as a reference, so that when you go back, I would encourage you to, start to gather some of these supplies and do some bookmaking with your families.